Making headlines for this week of September the 9th. State of shame. Asian nations publicly defy the United States, suggesting increased isolation on global stage. Standing Rock stands. Political irony amidst protests and Army issues positive statement on pipeline protest. Pathway to a new paradigm. China issues first yuan-denominated SDR ahead of official launch at the end of September. And soft disclosure technologies. BRICS nations in space race and new EM space engine gaining approval and acceptance.
With news around, upon, within, and beyond our planet, the program making disclosure official. This is Cosmic Vision News. Here is Jeffrey West.
Greetings and blessings to all. 9 days into the month of September, and it seems that numerous events are already underway to support the various claims that September is going to be a huge month for shifts on numerous levels to take place. Seemingly small incidents may be directly connected to other larger geopolitical and geoeconomic events. The Geopolitics.co website has claimed that U.S. global hegemony is officially dead. In this article, the following was written: Humanity is now in the cusp for a massive global-wide revolution in engineering and scientific development as divisively regressive geopolitics are being shamed in the global stage and instigations for new wars are effectively suppressed. For the last 4 years or so, railways and sea and airports were being built across Asia, and these projects will only accelerate in the coming months as the Khazarian transnational crime syndicate is being pinned down at every level. The article also adds how the fraudulent international trade agreements, such as the TTIP, the TTP, and TISA, are being exposed, and how the Clinton Foundation is being exposed, with banker resignations and NATO's inability to get a war started to support its agenda. The article then adds, but so far, the biggest geopolitical event this year is the epic express rejection of U.S. interference in the ASEAN-China region. ASEAN is the Association of Southeast Nations, consisting of 10 countries: Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Brunei Darussalam, Vietnam, Laos PDR, Myanmar, and Cambodia. The ASEAN nations just finished a summit of their own on September 8th and 9th in the small country of Laos. The article adds that China positively responded to the ASEAN community's establishment of a well-defined code of conduct in the West Philippine Sea to avoid miscommunications in the area, and all parties have agreed that the best way to find resolution in the conflict zone, where an estimated $5 trillion of physical commerce passes annually, is only through dialogue, trade cooperation, and the sharing of natural resources in contested areas, as it has been done for thousands of years prior to the Western divide and conquer interference. As well, Indonesian President Duterte laid out some very direct language to U.S. President Obama, but also to UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. The article noted specifically that Duterte's verbal outbursts prior to the ASEAN summit in 2016 were meant to underscore the fact that the Philippines is no longer a U.S. vassal state. This seems to be a growing message. We start first by looking at the G20 event in Hangzhou, China. Even before the official event got started, a clear message was given to U.S. President Obama upon his arrival. A Geopolitics article on September the 4th described it this way: every high-profile meeting like the G20 involves an elaborate preparation from security down to the minutest detail of providing the red carpet welcome to every invited leader of member countries and guests. It would be unthinkable to not provide a mobile staircase to stick onto the side of a presidential plane that would lead the guests to the red carpet down below. But that's exactly what happened to the arrival of U.S. President Obama. China's leaders have been accused of delivering a calculated diplomatic snub to Obama after the president was not provided with a staircase to leave his plane during his chaotic arrival in Hangzhou before the start of the G20. The article quoted Jorge Guajardo, Mexico's former ambassador to China, as saying that these things do not happen by mistake, not with the Chinese. I've dealt with the Chinese for 6 years. I've done these visits. I took Xi Jinping to Mexico. I received 2 Mexican presidents in China. I know exactly how these things get worked out. It's down to the last detail in everything. It is not a mistake. Chinese President Xi delivered an epic snub, although perhaps publicly at Obama, but perhaps more directly to those who control the U.S. shadow government and criminal banking system. And it was a snub that reflected Asia's collective anger of U.S. interference in the region. A Zero Hedge article, also on September the 4th, noted that while Obama was being snubbed by President Xi and China, the arrival of Russian President Putin was met with full honors, a moving staircase and the full red carpet treatment, and the welcome went perfectly without any issues. One can be very sure something dramatic is happening on the global scene when countries begin publicly standing up to the U.S., and they are not, in turn, punished for it. According to the G20 website, a 48-point communiqué was issued by the leaders after the summit. It would take too long to read all the points, but the link is in the show summary for those who wish to know what the leaders declared. Here are a few key points released in no particular order. We also met at a time of continuing shifts and profound transformations in the configuration of the global economic landscape and dynamics for growth. With these transformations come challenges and uncertainties as well as opportunities. The choices we make together will determine the effectiveness of our response to the challenges of today and help to shape the world economy of the future. Next, we are determined to foster an innovative, invigorated, interconnected, and inclusive world economy to usher in a new era of global growth and sustainable development, taking into account the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, and the Paris Agreement. I'll come back to the Paris Agreement in a moment. Next, in this context, we, the G20, as the premier forum for international economic cooperation, forge a comprehensive and integrated narrative for strong, sustainable, balanced, and inclusive growth, and hereby adopt the attached package of policies and actions, the Hangzhou Consensus, based on the following items. Vision. We will strengthen the G20 growth agenda to catalyze new drivers of growth, open up new horizons for development, lead the way in transforming our economies in a more innovative and sustainable manner, and better reflect shared interests of both present and coming generations. Integration. We will pursue innovative growth concepts and policies by forging synergy among fiscal, monetary, and structural policies, enhancing coherence between economic, labor, employment, and social policies, as well as combining demand management with supply-side reforms, short-term with mid- to long-term policies, economic growth with social development, and environmental protection. Openness. We will work harder to build an open world economy, reject protectionism, promote global trade and investment, including through further strengthening the multilateral trading system, and ensure broad-based opportunities through and public support for expanded growth in a globalized economy. Inclusiveness. We will work to ensure that our economic growth serves the needs of everyone and benefits all countries and all people, including in particular women, youth, and disadvantaged groups, generating more quality jobs, addressing inequalities, and eradicating poverty so that no one is left behind. And the next point, we recognize that in the long run, innovation is a key driver of growth for both individual countries and the global economy as a whole. we are committed to tackling one of the root causes of weak growth by taking innovation as a key element in our effort to identify new growth engines for individual countries and the world economy, which will also contribute to creating new and better jobs, building a cleaner environment, increasing productivity, addressing global challenges, improving people's lives, and building dynamic, cooperative, and inclusive innovation ecosystems. This is just a very small sample, but for those who have been following the global change story for a long time, they can no doubt begin to read between the lines of a few of these points and begin to see that strong hints are being made for global geopolitical and geoeconomic change. Presidents Xi, Obama, and Putin all delivered speeches in press conferences following the meetings. Links to all three press conferences will be in the show summary for those wishing to hear what the leaders had to say, both publicly and reading between the lines. It might seem that some key synchronicities were taking place at this time. Not only are there some grand astrological and energetic events taking place, but China happens to be the host country at the same time and during the same month in which its yuan currency begins preparing for its formal entry into the basket of global reserve currencies known as the Special Drawing Right, or SDR. We'll look more at this in the financial news. I mentioned moments ago the Paris Agreement. There are some sources reporting that although the agreement was presented to the world as a document for environmental awareness and change, there were lines of text included that were not revealed publicly, but allegedly claimed to include various terms of surrender of the global cabal in allowing the new geoeconomic and geopolitical reforms to begin unfolding. Although the global cabal appears to have succeeded in installing its puppet candidate into power in Brazil following the coup d'etat against former President Dilma Rousseff, the remaining BRICS countries and a seemingly increasing number of partner countries are making it clear to the banking cabal and the Khazarian mafia controllers that their power and control over global affairs appears to be at an end. However, just because their power may be decreasing globally, it doesn't mean that they can't still exert some degree of power on various local levels. And it appears that there are still some factions of this group that have a little bit of power, and they are eager to demonstrate it. Earlier this week, on September the 6th, traffic videos showing a car crossing the median of a road in Moscow and crashing head-on into one of Putin's official transport vehicles, killing the driver of the vehicle. It was reported that this driver has been with the presidential fleet for over 40 years and was apparently one of Putin's most trusted drivers. Sources have speculated that this was an attempted assassination on Putin, although he was not in the vehicle at the time. Assuming this is true, it would mean that there are interests within Moscow who have the ability to track the movement of the presidential vehicle in order to know where it was. If it was an assassination attempt on Putin, however, then it is clear the cabal sources in Russia are not well informed. Regardless of the motive, there is one thing for sure. Putin will take time to reflect on what the cabal has done, just as he has done every other time the cabal does something to him or Russia. When Putin decides he is ready to strike back, he will strike back, and he will strike back hard. It will not surprise me to see something significant happen very soon to indicate that Putin is not happy about this. I realize that there are other sources out there that are more than willing to declare that the global cabal has officially surrendered and that a long-awaited revaluation of certain currencies is about to take place. Although I would like to believe that this will happen, I am not yet convinced that it will unfold the way many sources are believing it will unfold. I believe the global economy and the geopolitical structure is changing rapidly, and I also believe that we are transitioning to a new economic paradigm. What I am not quite convinced of yet is exactly how and when it will happen, and who and what will be involved with it. In other geopolitical news, another show of force is being taken against the U.S. government, and this show of force is taking place within the U.S. and has apparently become the largest Native American protest or largest protest in history. An article appearing on the earthchild.co.cza website on September the 3rd writes that right now the largest Native American protest, not protest, in history is happening in the Dakotas. What's going on? Well, the U.S. government is taking control of Native American lands and forcing them to allow oil developers to drill on their land and move oil via pipelines. From watching what happened with the tar sands of Canada, we can get a good glimpse at what the land will look like after they're done with it. Running through a similar pathway as that of the well-known failed Keystone XL project, the Bakken pipeline would run across the Ogallala Aquifer and the Mississippi rivers through sovereign native lands. The article also reported that after more than an hour-long hearing, Judge James E. Boasberg said he'll decide as early as September 9th on the injunction request the Standing Rock Sioux tribe filed against the so-called Bakken pipeline, a massive fracked oil line that would cut through 4 Midwestern states and hundreds of waterways. We are pleased that we had our day in court, and we look forward to a ruling soon, said Standing Rock Sioux Tribal Chairman Dave Archambault II. I believe that everyone who attended the hearing today will understand that the tribe is seeking fundamental justice here. Native Americans say the pipeline threatens sacred sites and drinking water resources and that no meaningful consultation took place. The Army Corps of Engineers disagrees. During the court hearing, the agency said that the tribe declined to be part of the process. The tribe in turn said they didn't want to legitimize a flawed process. The company building the pipeline, Dakota Access, says the project is safe and will benefit the region and boost energy independence. They have, however, agreed to stop construction in that area of North Dakota until the court rules on the injunction. The hearing in D.C. comes about a month after the Standing Rock Sioux tribe sued the Engineer Corps over the permit the Corps gave to the developer, Dakota Access, to build on an area roughly half-mile north of the reservation and through the Missouri River, as well as other federal waterways. Tim Giago of the Huffington Post had written an article back in November of 2014 stating that the final Indian War in America was about to begin. It could, perhaps, be fairly argued that this battle may now be coming to a head at Standing Rock. CounterCurrentNews.com reported on September the 2nd that many feel that America's continued investment in antiquated sources of fuels is not worth the money. With European and Asian nations striving to become carbon neutral with green energy sources, it is tragic that America is caught up in nostalgic energy sources. Over the past 30 years in American history, we have not had the best track record of producing and distributing oil safely. Going back to the Exxon Valdez oil disaster in 1989, oil spills and oil-related disasters have become a frequent narrative. The protest has gained some high-level celebrity help, too. The article noted that Shailene Woodley, star of the Divergent series of movies, and Susan Sarandon have given their support and commitment to the movement. Reports also indicate that Leonardo DiCaprio is among those present at the protest as well. In what may end up being the greatest irony ever in a U.S. presidential election, RT reported on September 7th that when Green Party presidential candidate Dr. Jill Stein joined in protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline, she may have gone too far. Stein is accused of criminal trespass and criminal mischief, along with her vice presidential pick, Ajamu Baraka. Morton County Police announced on Facebook on Tuesday that they have issued an arrest warrant for both Stein and Baraka. Both face charges of criminal trespass and mischief after Baraka spray-painted decolonization on a bulldozer, with Stein spray-painting "I approve this message" on another, according to court affidavits posted on Facebook. The charges are both Class B misdemeanors, which carry a maximum penalty of $1,000 and 30 days in jail. How tragically ironic that a presidential and vice presidential candidate may be fined and jailed for protesting and resisting corporate and cabal crimes, and yet Hillary Clinton has been protected and allowed to continue her pursuit for the White House despite being complicit in numerous other and infinitely more harmful crimes than Stein. John Nichols, writing for The Nation on September 9th, wrote the following: Bill McKibben has called the pipeline fight a leadership test that presidential candidates cannot avoid. McKibben noted that Stein showed up to meet with the tribes and back their fight in a Los Angeles Times opinion editorial, and he also urged Clinton to take a stand in support of the struggle of the Standing Rock Sioux, and also to stand up for a democratic platform that speaks of a profound moral and legal responsibility to the Indian tribes. McKibben acknowledges that throughout our history we have failed to live up to that trust and promises. As Democrats, we will constantly seek to ensure that American Indian communities are safe, healthy, educated, innovative, and prosperous. It's the next chapter in a very old story, 500 years of broken promises, writes McKibben, with regard to the duty of one to take a stand. Clinton can't stop it, but she can speak out, and if she did so, perhaps the Obama administration and the Army Corps would wake up and realize that it's 2016, not 1840. Surely an intervention by Clinton would get more attention, but the intervention by Stein and the attention to the arrest threat she now faces offers a reminder of the consequential role that independent and third-party candidates can and should play in our politics. Spokespeople or representatives of the petroleum industry continue to insist that the industry and pipelines are safe. However, an article posted on the For Effective Government website reports that since 2010, over 3,300 incidents of crude oil and liquefied natural gas leaks or ruptures have occurred on U.S. pipelines. These incidents have killed 80 people, injured 389 more, and cost $2.8 billion in damages. They also released toxic polluting chemicals in local soil, waterways, and air. Over 1,000 of these incidents occurred on pipelines carrying crude oil. High Country News, a nonprofit news organization in Colorado, mapped these spills. The link with the map of spills will be shown in the show summary, and it is extensive. The article adds that nearly half of America's crude oil pipelines are more than 50 years old, increasing the chance of corrosion and failure. Human error and failure of operators to act on potential vulnerabilities in their pipelines also contribute to accidents. Moreover, only 139 federal pipeline inspectors are responsible for examining over 2.6 million miles of pipeline. That's nearly 18,000 miles of pipeline per inspector. Clearly not enough to ensure the integrity of our nation's aging pipeline infrastructure. Lawrence O'Donnell, a commentator for MSNBC, offered some insights on what he sees happening with America's indigenous population, and for some, it is perhaps a breath of fresh air coming from a mainstream media outlet.
Dakota means friend, friendly. The people who gave that name to the Dakotas have sadly never been treated as friends. The people whose language was used to name the Dakotas and Minnesota and Iowa, Oklahoma, Ohio, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and other states, the Native American tribes, the people who were here before us, long before us, have never been treated as friends. They have been treated as enemies and dealt with more harshly than any other enemy in any of this country's wars. After all of our major wars, we signed peace treaties and lived by those treaties. After World War II, when we made peace with Germany, we then did everything we possibly could to rebuild Germany. No Native American tribe has ever been treated as well as we treated Germans after World War II. Donald Trump and his supporters now fear the country being invaded by foreigners who want to change our way of life. A fear that Native Americans have lived with every day for over 500 years. The original sin of this country is that we invaders shot and murdered our way across the land, killing every Native American we could and making treaties with the rest. This country was founded on genocide before the word genocide was invented, before there was a war crimes tribunal in The Hague. When we finally stopped actively killing Native Americans for the crime of living here before us, we then proceeded to violate every treaty we made with the tribes, every single treaty. We piled crime on top of crime on top of crime against the people whose offense against us was simply that they lived where we wanted to live. We don't feel the guilt of those crimes because we pretend they happened a very long time ago in ancient history, and we actively suppress the memories of those crimes. But there are people alive today whose grandparents were in the business of killing Native Americans. That's how recent these crimes are. Every once in a while, there is a painful and morally embarrassing reminder, as there is this week in North Dakota, near the Standing Rock Sioux Reservation, where hundreds of people have gathered and camped out in opposition to an interstate pipeline being built from North Dakota to Illinois. The protest is being led by this country's original environmentalists, Native Americans. For hundreds of years, they were our only environmentalists, the only people who thought that land and rivers should be preserved in their natural state, the only people who thought a mountain or a prairie or a river could be a sacred place. There are now over 90 tribes gathered in protest of that pipeline. That protest will surely continue even if the judge allows construction to proceed. And so we face the prospect next month of the descendants of the first people to ever set foot on that land being arrested by the descendants of the invaders who seized that land, arrested for trespassing. That we still have Native Americans left in this country to be arrested for trespassing on their own land is testament not to the mercy of the genocidal invaders who seized and occupied their land, but to the stunning strength and the 500 years of endurance and the undying dignity of the people who were here long before us, the people who have always known what is truly sacred in this world.
There is some positive news, however, on this story. In a late update to this story on September the 9th, the U.S. Department of Justice issued a joint statement with the Department of the Army, the Department of the Interior as well, regarding Standing Rock Sioux Tribe versus U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. According to the statement, we appreciate the District Court's opinion on the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers' compliance with the National Historic Preservation Act. However, important issues raised by the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe and other tribal nations and their members regarding the Dakota Access Pipeline specifically and pipeline-related decision-making generally remain. Therefore, the Department of the Army, the Department of Justice, and the Department of the Interior will take the following steps. The Army will not authorize constructing the Dakota Access Pipeline on Corps land bordering or under Lake Oahe until it can determine whether it will need to reconsider any of its previous decisions regarding the Lake Oahe site under the National Environmental Policy Act or other federal laws. Therefore, the construction of the pipeline on Army Corps land bordering or under Lake Oahe will not go forward at this time. The Army will move expeditiously to make this determination as everyone involved, including the pipeline company and its workers, deserves a clear and timely resolution. In the interim, we request that the pipeline company voluntarily pause all construction activity within 20 miles east or west of Lake Oahe. In recent days, we have seen thousands of demonstrators come together peacefully with support from scores of sovereign tribal governments to exercise their First Amendment rights and to voice heartfelt concerns about the environment and historic sacred sites. It is now incumbent on all of us to develop a path forward that serves the broadest public interest. As long as the rights of all humans, be they from indigenous groups or any other group that is the target of the global cabal, as long as they continue to be violated without people standing up and making their voices heard, actions such as these will only continue. The statement just issued, however, seems to suggest that there is a positive group within the Army that is seeking to resolve domestic issues fairly and peacefully. So this may be a positive sign of transformation unfolding on U.S. soil. The energies of these times are supporting a rising up against the global cabal, but I emphasize again how important it is to do so in ways that are as peaceful and honorable as possible. But there may come times when other actions become necessary. If one is not willing to find the courage to stand up in action oneself, one can at least use one's energies to focus on positive, healthy, and meaningful change for humanity and our planet, and choose to act in ways that are honorable for the highest good of all. In financial news, in the follow-up to the G20 summit last week, the world may have just gotten its first hint of what China told global leaders last week when they said that quick and decisive actions are needed to turn the global economy around. Max Kaiser and Stacey Herbert of the Kaiser Report look at what China has done this week that may set the tone for the movement of the global economy.
In this business of global finance and geoeconomics, do you trust the new MSCR? We haven't seen an SDR bond created since 1981 until now.
The MSDR is this new market SDR, which is a special drawing right that the IMF issues as part of a Bretton Woods agreement back in post-World War II. And this is the first new bond that was issued in yuan in China, sold in China this past week. But, I want to first look at the setup to the situation. So in Europe and in America and other major central banks around the world, we've seen a lot of crazy happen. So for example, the Swiss National Bank, it emerges, is now the 8th largest shareholder in Facebook, the Swiss National Bank. They own more shares than Mark Zuckerberg. He, of course, has more voting rights of his shares. We have the Bank of Japan buying up every ETF shares all over markets around the world. They're going really crazy. We have elections in the U.S., which are from another world. They're so crazy. But patiently, quietly, without calling attention to themselves, we see exactly what Kai's report has said for years with our guests like Jim Rickards. He has said the special drawing right would be used to roll up all the debt in the world. It would become like a global currency, and this is what China wanted. And this is what we have. We have a few headlines on this. Here's one from MarketWatch. And they think this new SDR, dollar status, won't be tarnished by sale of Chinese SDR bonds. So they're trying to tell people in America, don't worry, be calm. It doesn't mean the end of us. Well, the World Bank's forthcoming launch of $2.8 billion worth of bonds denominated in special drawing rights on the Chinese market is a further landmark step in China's long march to support the International Monetary Fund's composite accounting unit as a potential rival to the dollar. So from October 1st, the Chinese yuan, the renminbi, is part of the SDR basket. So it'll be 10% will be yuan.
The entrance to the abattoir is a windy road that goes back and forth. You don't want to scare the cows on the way to the slaughter. So people in the media, financial media, are telling folks, don't worry about the dollar, don't worry about the British pound, don't worry about the rise of the SDR and RMB and China. And they go through this windy road up to the abattoir, and then finally you get to the head of the abattoir and you lose your head because now you've lost your place as the world reserve currency, as Britain did after World War I era, World War II. The U.S. took over. Now it's time for the U.S. to pass the baton over to a consortium led by SDRs, IMF, China, and the New World Order, as some have called it.
This SDR was actually what John Maynard Keynes wanted originally for a global reserve currency. It's basically a unit of account, as they point out in that article there in MarketWatch. It's a unit of account. It's not a currency per se. It's like the original blockchain in a way. It was in order to avoid all these trade imbalances that we now have. China itself does not want the yuan or the renminbi. They want it to be internationalized. They do not want the reserve currency, because to have a reserve currency, you have to be a big debtor like the U.S. has. They don't want that. But, as this headline says from Reuters, CNBC, Chinese investors uninspired by World Bank landmark SDR bond auction. This is because the yield is extremely low. It's well under 1%. I think it would be the first bond issuance ever in China to be under 1%. Inclusion in the SDR, however, was seen as a major diplomatic victory for Beijing, which is trying to increase the global stature of its currency for use in trade and as a reserve currency. But the victory is largely symbolic so long as SDR bonds remain lightly used. IMF data shows that SDR holdings made up only 3.24% of global official currency reserves at the end of 2014. No official yield range has been published for the bond issuance, and no final date for the sale has been set either. So investors in Beijing were a bit lukewarm on it, but they will not allow the auction intended to support the internationalization of the currency fail for lack of demand. So the Chinese government was going to step in to make sure that whatever happens, that the bonds were all bought up.
Yeah, I get your point that it's a global currency that would facilitate transactions globally, but it is nevertheless issued by a central bank, the IMF, and who has come under lots of scrutiny over the past 10, 15 years for playing favorites, and their role with the Troika in Greece and in other places in Europe has been not as very honest. So they are subject to the same problems you have with other central banks.
There's a lot of panic in the West, and do something, buy up Facebook shares, buy up ETFs, do something. And people think like something's being done. I think China is not panicking. They're sitting there calmly. They see what's going to happen. They know there's only so much fraud, so much leverage, so much debt you can pile upon a small little base of economic activity. So it's not like a hostile act. They just know that the dollar is going to fail. It's inevitable. The mathematics of it do not work. So they're getting ready patiently. They always say he who has the most gold rules. Well, China has the most gold, but they're also buying up the SDRs, as Jim Rickards has said when we last interviewed him before Summer Solutions, is that they'll have all these SDRs. They have them in their economy. They have them there now, the billions in new SDRs issued, market SDRs. So for them, on the surface, in the short term, and remember we only think short term over on this side of the world, short term it doesn't make any sense because these Chinese banks will have to pay the bond holders in strong currencies like the dollar or the euro and take the weak currency, the yuan. So, however, in a longer term plan, if they're thinking long term and strategically, this could be owning the gold.
Well, clearly this is the direction they're going in, and now it's starting to play out on the world stage, as folks that have been talking about on the show for a few years.
We have Jim Rickards, and he's quoted in this article from Valentin Schmidt, who we also interviewed from the Epoch Times, talking about China and this new SDR, the MSDR. What China's SDR bond issue really means, this is the first step toward one world currency. They promised, they deliver. The World Bank will issue this new $2.8 billion bond. The current governor of the People's Bank of China, he says, Zhao Zhiwan, has advocated for the SDR to become the next global reserve currency for a long time now. Quote, special consideration to giving the SDR a greater role. The SDR has the features and potential to act as a super sovereign reserve currency, wrote Zhu in 2009. He also wanted the yuan to be included in the SDR, which is going to happen on October 1st. Take heed of his predictions. So again, we have in private hands, and these private banks and private investors are building up these SDRs in China. they look like loser bets at the moment, but on a long-term strategic plan, we could see what's happening there.
Right. Well, the composition of the SDR, we get into this in the interview that comes after the break. The representation of the Chinese currency is 10% in that basket, which represents the SDR. Now, contrast that with the index of the foreign exchange market, where the Chinese currency is just barely in the top 20 of most actively traded currencies. This would put them in the top 5, probably, which would be an enormous leap forward. So the central planners, over there in China, when it comes to figuring out how they want to architect the global financial markets over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, seem to be playing a pretty shrewd game.
But also, back to this article from the Epoch Times, they say that now that the first issuance is well underway, remember the first issuance, they're probably going to be second or third or fourth, it is easy to lever up the balance sheets of international development organizations and keep issuing or printing SDR obligations even in the trillions until even private market actors support and accept them. Once the SDR is widely accepted as payment, the IMF could just redeem all outstanding local currencies for SDR, and the world would not only have a new reserve currency, but just one global currency. Quote, "You create new liquidity. That's the kind of reform that could change the international system immediately." This is
right. So you had the banks in crisis in 2008. The central banks are in crisis in 2016, 2017. So to bail out the central banks now, they create the SDR. So they have to create $100 trillion worth of SDR to roll up the bad debts. They take all those bad debts that are owned by the central banks, and as they become full up and their balance sheets can't buy any more of this garbage from the banks, they then sell it to the IMF in exchange for SDRs. So you have a whole another chapter coming in monetization lunacy yet to be played out, because you've got now $100 trillion of fresh capital that was just birthed into existence by pushing a few buttons to bail out the central banks, who in 2008 bailed out the commercial banks.
Kaiser and Herbert, from what I think I understand about the geoeconomic situation, appear to be on track, and from their perspective, they could very well be correct that a massive SDR issuance to bail out the central banks may create more fiat currency debt through a fresh capital infusion of money created out of thin air. As Herbert stated, it seems, however, that China does not want the status as global reserve currency because of the inherent problems associated with having that status. What Kaiser and Herbert are either unaware of or are choosing to ignore are the sources who are speculating that China is quietly pushing all countries that align with their Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank to begin backing their own national currencies with gold or at least some kind of physical resource. Kaiser and Herbert seem to feel that the issuance of SDR bonds may perpetuate the fiat debt crisis, but as they also pointed out, the SDR could also be used to tie in all global debt together. So this may also suggest that a strategy is in play to tie all global debt together and then simply scrap the debt in a jubilee and reboot the global economy according to resources-backed currencies as another transitional step in cleaning up the geopolitical and geoeconomic mess created by the global banking cabal. The signs coming out of the G20 in various media seem to show that the U.S. no longer has the global power it once had, and the U.S. is beginning to find itself increasingly more isolated on the global stage. With the U.S. fiscal year coming to a close on September 30th, and with the official launch of the yuan in the SDR basket on October the 1st, the message may be starting to hit home that the global economy is no longer under the control of an international banking cartel, even though they may think they still have more power. Also, during the past week, another financial event took place that is more or less ignored by the Western media. This was the second annual Eastern Economic Forum, which started September the 2nd in the eastern Russian city of Vladivostok. For those who have been following the birth of the new global economy and the new Silk Road trading project across both Asia and Europe, one may recognize some very positive and progressive initiatives being discussed at this event. From my perspective, it appears that Russia and the Eurasian region is actively gearing up to challenge Western hegemony, and that they are more than ready and more than able to succeed at it also. According to the website for the forum, some of the following topics on plan for discussion included the following: strategic vectors of healthcare development in the Russian Far East, developing small enterprise in the Russian Far East, aquatic bioresources in exchange for investment, the Far East hectare, new opportunities for living and doing business in the Russian Far East. And this is the project I believe CVN reported on a few weeks ago, where the government of Russia was giving land away to people willing to own and have agriculture on that property. Next, mineral resources management in the Russian Far East, improving the performance of a resource economy, perhaps a hint to the coming metal-backed currencies. Development of economic cooperation from Lisbon to Vladivostok. This is in reference to perhaps the One Belt, One Road trading, or the Silk Road trading route that Putin has been discussing from the Pacific Ocean all the way to the Atlantic Ocean. As well, energy cooperation within the Asia-Pacific region, building bridges. Investment projects in the transport and logistics sector, developing alternative and local energy markets in the Russian Far East, global projects for hydrocarbon processing, attracting investment. Now, this could perhaps have something to do with hemp. Investment projects in the infrastructure construction sector. On September the 1st, RT reported the following about the forum. Developing the Far East is one of the key priorities of Russian domestic policy. On Friday, President Putin opened the Economic Forum in Vladivostok. Of course, remember this was written on the 1st, which in Russian, Vladivostok means Master of the East. The main focus will be luring businesses willing to invest in Russia's Far East, and to date there are, according to RT, 130 agreements totaling 1 trillion rubles, or $15.3 billion, ready to be signed at the forum. In a year, we expect to double that, said Alexander Galushka, who heads the ministry developing Russia's Far Eastern region. The forum will host businesses from Japan, South Korea, China, Singapore, Germany, and other countries. Among the confirmed participants are the heads of 240 Russian and 207 foreign companies. The key guest will be the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. One of the main business questions will be the region's poor infrastructure. Just 6.3 million Russians live in an area which is larger than India and shares a common border with China. It has a number of large mineral deposits and may become an export center, but implementing projects is extremely expensive. Thus, the forum's participants will discuss how much money is required to invest in infrastructure to reach deposits of gold, titanium, rare earth metals, coal, and hydrocarbons. The Western governments and media would like us to think that their message about Russia being the demon has been successful, and perhaps in some ways it has, to those who have chosen not to inform themselves about what is really going on in the world. However, it appears to be increasingly more true that less people are buying the rhetoric, and more countries are beginning to realize that it is more harmful in the long run to surrender to the U.S. and place sanctions on Russia when those same sanctions only hurt the country applying the sanctions and do not hurt the U.S. at all. On September 3rd, RT followed up and reported that the forum has seen more than 200 agreements worth at least 1.7 trillion rubles, or more than $26 billion signed. This according to Alexander Galushka, Russia's Far East Development Minister. More than 3,000 people from 60 countries are taking part in the forum. The largest delegation has come from Japan. The second largest is from China, and the third is from People's Republic of Korea. What is interesting to note is that a key speaker was Japan Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and this may indicate some truth to certain sources who are starting to say that Japan is now also beginning to shift away from being under U.S. control and moving towards the growing Eastern Alliance. Although people of the West are not yet being told this on a mass public scale, the move appears to now be on to participate in this new economy coming from the East. In a separate article, RT reported on September 2nd that building a futuristic high-speed Hyperloop transportation system in Russia will cost $1.5 billion, according to William Shore, who runs Caspian Venture Capital. Caspian is the investment branch of Russia's Suma Group, which is interested in building the system. The innovative project was presented at the Eastern Economic Forum on Friday and has received approval from Russia's Transport Ministry. Moscow has announced that it is planning its own pilot project for the Hyperloop, planned to start in December. Moscow has announced that it is planning its own pilot project for the Hyperloop, planned to start in December. Several other pilot projects are currently underway in the U.S., Dubai, and in Europe. In general news, there are always going to be certain topics that seem to ignite emotions because the topics are so passionate to those individuals. There's nothing wrong with this, of course, because one may gently try to explain that no one individual is in possession of the truth about all things, although, in the same breath, an argument could be made that each human does have all the truth contained within oneself, but one has not sufficiently awakened to the point of receiving this information in a way that can be wholly interpreted and understood. Religion has often been a subject that has been used to separate people because people have been taught and conditioned to believe that their understanding of a divine creator is the one true God, and this automatically makes others wrong, even though one may claim that one's definition of God is not to judge others, lest one be judged accordingly. The environment arguably also strikes a nerve with people. There are religious people who have some difficulty seeing God within a plant, an animal, a tree, or in water. There are atheists who live in strong reverence for the natural world, and there are those of other faiths, including paganism, that understand humanity's connection to and its dependence upon the natural world for survival. Then comes a topic like climate change. This can be a very challenging topic to address with some, especially those who are very knowledgeable about the environment, at least the environment that exists within the current vibration and paradigm of living. Some, perhaps many, will shake their heads at statements like this and ask what one is talking about. We have grown up and lived in a world that has had 4 seasons, and we have accepted that there has always been ice on the polar extremes of our planet. An article posted on the Euronews website on September 9th reports the following story, and it is understandable that people may become very alarmed. The article reported that rapid glacier melting is radically altering the landscape of Iceland. Similar stories have appeared about ice shields in Greenland and also other northern countries. The article closes with the following. Scientists have said that they expect the glacier's rapid decline to continue over the coming years. Now, the trick is in trying to discern whether or not this is a statement that global warming is a problem and will continue, or whether this is a subtle hint that there are people who know our planet is shifting to a new reality where our planet will have a temperate climate all over the planet and will no longer have the extreme ranges of temperatures that we have historically experienced. Although there is data to suggest that our planet has experienced phases of weather patterns, the truth about these phases is not yet known because the history of our planet has not been revealed to the people of the world, at least officially, such as the existence of advanced civilizations of Atlantis and Lemuria, among others. The average temperature of the planet has been rising over the last 15 to 20 years. Individuals and organizations have been claiming that the global warming is due to the increased carbon dioxide emissions, or CO2 emissions. Leaders meet and acknowledge that there is a problem with CO2 emissions. They claim that something needs to be done, and yet big oil still dominates the culture in the Western world and especially in North America. logging companies continue to strip vast areas of trees that help process the CO2. As reported last week, I said that the problem is not completely the amount of CO2 in the air, although big oil, big coal, and other multinational companies are contributors to this. But it is also the deforestation that is a huge contributor to the problem. Now, especially in the last 10 years, there has been a massive increase in the spraying of chemicals in the skies under the name of geoengineering, and different sources offer different interpretations for why certain chemicals are being sprayed above us. An article on the Natural News website by Daniel Barker on August 31st suggests that scientists are now coming forward to expose the man-made global warming as a complete hoax and science lie. In 2006, while writing my master's thesis for the University for Peace, Al Gore's science data was a part of my argument for global change. At that time, his information was true to me. I believe it is no longer truth for me. This is the problem with figures, data, and statistics. They can be created, massaged, and released to the public to make them believe anything. Barker writes, the highly politicized climate change debate rages on as we approach the crucial 2016 election in the U.S., despite an ever-growing body of evidence revealing the fact that catastrophic man-made global warming is nothing more than an elaborate hoax. Barker goes into more detail about this issue and its relevance to the coming election. I choose not to focus on that, although the link will be in the show summary for those who wish to read it. Barker added, Al Gore's dire predictions of the melting polar ice on a massive scale have proved to be completely false. In fact, in 2014, a year that was touted as being the hottest ever in Earth's history, there were record amounts of ice reported in Antarctica, an increase in Arctic ice, and record snowfalls across the globe. Global warming can be a very misinterpreted term. If you recall the movie The Day After Tomorrow, describing how the planet is changed forever because of massive cold storms that hit the northern hemisphere due to a collapsed current of water that stopped bringing warmer water to the northern hemisphere. In this movie, the melting ice from the polar regions caused fresh water to desalinate the North Atlantic conveyor that brings warm water north. This caused a massive freezing of many parts of the northern hemisphere. The claim was that global warming caused the massive ice age. Our planet can only rebalance itself through storms. And it is also through storms that our planet teaches humanity some very important lessons about how we live and how we survive. Barker quotes a paragraph from the National Review. A 2008 survey by two German scientists, Dennis Gray and Hans von Storch, found that a significant number of scientists were skeptical of the ability of existing global climate models to accurately predict global temperatures, precipitation, sea level changes, or extreme weather events, even over a decade. They were far more skeptical as the time horizon increased. Barker also adds that our mainstream news sources, besides the National Review, have also been courageous enough to speak out against the global warming propaganda. Even the Wall Street Journal published an opinion editorial piece in 2015 challenging the anthropogenic global warming pseudoscience being promulgated by global warming proponents. And of course, there are more than 31,000 American scientists to date who have signed a petition challenging the climate change narrative, and over 9,000 of them hold doctorates in their respective fields. But hey, Al Gore and his cronies have also ignored that inconvenient truth as well. Many of those scientists who signed the petition were likely encouraged to speak out in favor of the truth after retired senior NASA atmospheric scientist John L. Casey revealed that solar cycles are largely responsible for warming periods on Earth, not human activity. So why would they lie? Profit, fear-mongering, and thus more power and control over humanity. It also leads to more debt for the average taxpayer because people blindly accept the message that global warming is man-made and thus money must be collected from people to pay for it, when governments themselves do not stop big oil from continuing to push oil as an energy source in the world, nor do governments stop logging companies from destroying vast forests, nor do governments legalize and legislate the hemp industry, because hemp, as reported last week, not only matures within 3 months instead of 40 years, it also processes significantly more CO2 than all trees and plants. The solutions are available, but governments and those in control are not policing themselves, and this becomes a scam, a lie, and hoax in itself. In disclosure-related news, the mystery seems to be getting deeper regarding the explosion of a SpaceX rocket last week. Here are the details that have emerged over the past week. In an article posted on the BBC, the following was reported. An investigation into how a SpaceX rocket exploded is uncovering a difficult and complex failure, according to Elon Musk, the firm's founder. Musk tweeted that the explosion of Falcon 9 during a routine filling operation was the most complicated in the space travel firm's history. He said the engines weren't on and there was no apparent heat source. The article also re-emphasizes the following. Facebook, with Eutelsat Communications, had been due to use the Amos 6 satellite for broadband internet coverage for parts of sub-Saharan Africa as part of Facebook's Internet.org initiative. What is also, again, not mentioned is the alleged Israeli involvement in the mishap. A Veterans Today article by Ian Greenhalgh on September the 2nd reported that this explosion, however, is something altogether different. There was no mere explosion of a rocket while being fueled. This was a deliberate act of destruction. Now, for the really shocking bit. The craft responsible for this destruction was caught in the video. A small spherical object that flies from right to left on the screen and appears to have fired some kind of laser or beam weapon at the rocket. So now the big question is this. Just what had the Israelis built into that satellite that someone decided had to be destroyed before it could be placed in orbit? Our working theory, this is Veterans Today's theory, is that it was some kind of weapon, quite possibly a laser, as we received intelligence some time ago that a space-based laser had been used to cause several mysterious explosions in Iran. The VT article shows a series of photographs of the sphere as it passes the rocket, just as the rocket begins to explode. Last week, CVN reported on a Globe and Mail news article by Ivan Semeniuk, who wrote that the loss of the Amos 6 satellite is a devastating development for its Israeli-based operator, Spacecom. Last week, Space News, which covers the aerospace industry, reported that Beijing Jinhui Technology Group of China had agreed to buy Spacecom, but the sale was contingent on the successful launch of Amos 6. The loss of the satellite is also a blow for Facebook, as mentioned. The social media company was planning to use the satellite to expand coverage in Africa. This week, some exopolitical news has been thrown into the mix of events surrounding the story. Michael Sala, writing for exopolitics.org on September the 2nd, offered that information from some of his sources regarding the event. He writes that according to investigative reporter Jim Stone, the way in which one of the UFOs interacted with the rocket just as it exploded suggests that it was an attack and not a case of a fuel tank breach in the upper stage. The attack was intended to prevent the satellite from reaching orbit to perform a nefarious purpose. Sala goes on to add the following. The alleged attack follows earlier claims by secret space program whistleblower Corey Goode that space battles have recently intensified between rival secret space programs. Circumstantial support for Goode's claims emerged with President Barack Obama delivering a report to the U.S. Congress on May 26th proposing an integrated policy to deter potential enemies in space. In a letter released through the White House press secretary discussing the report, along with a classified annex, Obama said, "The report is the result of an interagency process with the objective to reduce risk to the United States and our allies in space, and to protect and preserve the rights, access, capabilities, use, and freedom of action of the United States in space. Success will require a multi-year effort and commitment across all departments and agencies, and I look forward to your continued support." Obama's multi-year effort and commitment across all departments and agencies was clearly intended to create and fight space wars as soon as possible. What adds significant support to Good's incredible claims of warring space alliances, according to Sala, is a recently published paper by an astrophysicist, Duncan Forgan, in the pre-publication science website rxiv.org. Forgan claims that rival alliances, what he describes as cliques, may disagree over the extent to which contact is allowed to happen on more primitive planets such as Earth. One clique attempting to place an interdict on contacting primitive civilizations is likely to encounter significant problems if another clique disagrees. It may well be the case that the Earth resides in a region of space occupied by a conservative clique bent on non-contact. The show summary offers some links for this story that show the series of photographs, so one can decide for oneself whether or not the circumstances around this event seem suspicious. One listener contacted CVN during the last week and shared with me that he believes the circular spheres could be Russian cosmospheres, which are about 18 meters in diameter or about 60 feet. The listener appears to be familiar with these objects, at least enough to state that the spheres have remained hidden for decades, and the fact that they appear to be back in use suggests the seriousness with which Putin is taking on the global cabal on numerous fronts. The listener reported to me the spheres are armed with charged particle beam weapons and that they are formidable. With all the UFO activity that appears to be showing up around the world, the appearance of these would offer a good cover story. I have not asked permission to mention the name of this listener, so at least for now I choose not to mention it, although I do thank that listener for sharing information with me. Of course, for some listeners who have never heard about the existence of civilizations and technologies from beyond Earth, nor have they heard about secret space alliances and battles taking place in space, this theory will be extremely hard to digest. CVN is not asking you to accept it. I invite you to look at the larger patterns, however, and perhaps explore more the larger series of geopolitical and geoeconomic events that are taking place and try to connect the dots. Even this may be hard to do because many people are not interested in certain subjects or topics and therefore are more inclined to ignore or discount any information that they are not interested in instead of learning how to critically question everything that we are being told and everything that we see happening around us in the world. It is safe to say that Russia is in possession of some formidable technology that even the global cabal and Khazarian mafia appear to not have access to on Earth. Russian planes were able to shut down the most advanced U.S. naval ship in its fleet over a year ago. We are witnessing countries doing international trading outside of the U.S. dollar, which means the U.S. is losing power over countries to force them to continue using the dollar, which helps fund the global cabal and its black budget projects, including those in space. We are witnessing destabilizations of countries that refuse to play the banking game of the global cabal. We are witnessing the rise of the people worldwide as they awaken and demonstrate that they are fed up with the status quo of being enslaved to criminally fraudulent fictional debt, while also being enslaved to a criminally fraudulent system of commercial rule disguised as law and being imposed on humanity without their informed or democratic consent. As the power of humanity continues to expand, and as the power of the global cabal continues to weaken, more souls are courageously stepping forward in whatever role they feel called to serve to help humanity and our planet at this time. This, in turn, empowers some global leaders to find the courage to start standing up and speaking out also. We are beginning to witness more leaders of more countries beginning to turn their backs on the U.S. because there is a growing alliance of other countries that are fed up with being manipulated, threatened, and controlled. To even hope to begin understanding all the events that are happening in this world at this time would mean that one would have to step beyond what we think we know is happening right now and begin to explore the larger, more scientific and mathematical, and dare I also say spiritual reasons for why things are happening so quickly at this time. We are transforming, and people are taking steps at this time to help facilitate this shift, and each individual in his or her purpose has an impact on a certain number of people. In tonight's final words, I explore this in a little bit more detail. Over to science and tech-related news now. As the global U.S. hegemony gets exposed, more countries are rightfully using their resources to further their own benefit and not the benefit of criminals who profit on the extortion, fraud, and racketeering of other people or countries. The BRICS post on August 29th asked if there is a space exploration race starting among BRICS nations. The article writes that on August 28th, India became only the fourth country in history to employ scramjet engines in the launch and propulsion of space rockets. Scramjet technology relies on hydrogen as fuel, while oxygen from the air is used as an oxidizer to burn the fuel. Combustion occurs externally while the craft is moving at supersonic speeds. While the U.S. has already used scramjet engines, China and Russia are also developing the technology. India's successful scramjet test came just 4 days after the China National Space Administration published images of its space probe and rover, which will be part of its upcoming mission to Mars. China plans to send a rover to Mars around 2020 and land by 2021 to explore the red planet and launch 150 long-range carrier rockets in the next 5 years for its ambitious space mission. The administration's director, Zhu Danji, had previously said the Mars probe is expected to orbit the red planet and deploy a rover all in one mission, which is quite difficult to achieve. China is also planning to launch a core module for its first space station sometime around 2018, part of a plan to have a permanent manned space station in service around 2022. Over the last few years, China has rapidly increased its focus on their space program. The article continues. 2 weeks ago, it launched a quantum-enabled communications satellite. The 600-plus kilogram quantum experiment at space scale, or QUESS satellite, the quantum experiment at space scale, will circle the Earth once every 90 minutes after it enters a sun-synchronous orbit at an altitude of 500 kilometers. In its 2-year mission, the QUESS is designed to establish hack-proof quantum communications by transmitting uncrackable keys from space to the ground, the administration said. China's current space program kicked into high gear with the launch of its first moon mission and rover in December of 2013. Although that mission ended earlier this August after 31 months, it did spur a new round of lunar exploration that will culminate in another probe to be sent to the dark side of the moon in 2018. China sent its first astronaut into space in 2003, becoming the third country after Russia and the U.S. to achieve independent manned space travel. China's rapid space program development comes on the heels of earlier successes by BRICS fellow member India. Regarding India, the article notes the following. In January, India successfully launched its 5th navigation satellite, joining 4 previous ones aimed at forming its independent navigation system. New Delhi is aiming to expand the country's influence in the competitive $300 billion global space industry. The Ernest-1E is the fifth navigation satellite in the Ernest space system, comprising 7 satellites, which would be an Indian version of the American Global Positioning System, or GPS. The launch of the satellite comes in the wake of India's very successful Mars mission of its own. India's $73 million Mars orbiter, Mangalyaan, which was launched in November of 2013 to explore the red planet's surface features, morphology, mineralogy, and search for methane in the Martian atmosphere using indigenous scientific instruments, entered its orbit in September of 2014. The mission was nothing short of historic. India became the first country to succeed on its first Mars mission and also the first in Asia to reach Mars. What is also significant about this is that India succeeded on its mission even though its budget was almost 90% smaller than the U.S. China and India join the small group of publicly acknowledged nations that have successfully gone into space, including Japan, the U.S., France, and Russia. In a separate but related story, Marianne Rousson, writing for the International Business Times, reported on September 2nd that the American Institute of Aeronautics and Astrophysics, the AIAA, has ended days of speculation by confirming it has indeed accepted a paper on the controversial space propulsion technology EM-Drive, signaling that the NASA Eagle Works paper has passed peer review. The Internet was set on fire on August 30th when independent scientist and EM-Drive skeptic Dr. Jose Rodal posted on the NASA Spaceflight Forum, in a now-deleted comment, that the new paper will be entitled Measurement of Impulsive Thrust from a Closed Radio Frequency Cavity in a Vacuum, and is authored by Harold White, Paul March, Lawrence, Vera, Sylvester, Brady, and Bailey. Rousson adds that the AIAA is one of the world's largest technical societies dedicated to aerospace innovation. It is made up of over 30,000 engineers and scientists from 88 countries and hosts a collection of 140,000 technical papers, as well as developing and maintaining industry standards and advocating on policy issues. There has been a great deal of debate over whether the EM-Drive works, and many academics in the international space community continue to believe that it is complete nonsense because the technology violates the law of conservation of momentum, and hence our understanding of physics. It is, however, a big deal for a major peer-reviewed journal to agree to publish research on this topic. In a separate article written the day before, Rousson explains more about the importance of this technology. She wrote the following on September the 1st. The EM-Drive is a new type of rocket engine first proposed by British scientist electrical engineer Roger Scheuer in 1999. Unlike conventional space rocket engines, the EM-Drive doesn't require any kind of propellant, also known as a reaction mass, to make propulsion possible. The idea is that electricity is converted into microwaves, and the microwave photons are fired into a truncated, cone-shaped, closed metal activity. When fired into the cavity, the microwave photons push against the large end of the cone, causing the small end to accelerate in the opposite direction. If its potential could be realized, Scheuer believed EM-Drive could transform the aerospace industry and potentially solve both the energy crisis and climate change by making it much cheaper to launch satellites and spacecraft into orbit, as well as helping to extend the operational lifetime of satellites. If you could get more satellites into space, some of them could be used to harness solar energy or to act as a shield against global warming. The technology would also make space travel much faster, although perhaps not warp speed fast, and it would also make flying cars feasible. It would appear that this may be one of the suppressed technologies that is now beginning to find its way into the mainstream consciousness to help push the soft disclosure of galactic civilizations and non-Earth technologies that can help transform our planet almost literally overnight. Of course, on the opposite side, we have to consider the fact that scientists are not yet aware of the potential dangers of this kind of technology and what they might have on the fabric of space and time once they are fully implemented, either on Earth or in space. Also included in the show summary for this story will be links to a PDF file that allegedly contains all of Nikola Tesla's patents for his technologies. Anyone who has a passion for Tesla technology and knowledge for technology will find this information meaningful, and hopefully it may inspire a listener or two to use the information for the benefit of humanity and our planet. In this week's final words, I hinted last week that we are entering what many are calling a very energetically intense period, but each human is going to experience this period in a way that is unique to that individual to support her or his personal growth moving forward at this time. Therefore, it is impossible to say how this period will ultimately affect any one individual. Vera Ingeborg wrote in an article on the Love Has Won website on September 1st that furious, flaming, explosive, wild. Just a couple of words to describe the energies at play. Can it get any more intense than that? Yes, it can, so buckle up for the ride in September. We have entered another round of intense energy. Mercury went retrograde yesterday, and tomorrow we are starting into September with a solar eclipse on this new moon, of course already passed. Since a couple of weeks, we are constantly receiving very high light frequencies that come onto the planet unfiltered and push us into growth like never before. The energies feel different to what we experienced in the first 7 months of the year. These were very emotional, watery, heavy. August, with the Lion's Gate, was a transitional month from water into fire, and that is what we feel now. The fire energies are really working on burning away everything that needs to go now, that is still in the way to be fully anchored in 5D. New Earth is approaching quickly now. It might seem scary to let go of everything we got so used to, but really there is no need for these things in 5D, as it is a place without fear or darkness. Be brave, and that means to let the fire energies burn away everything that does not serve you anymore. It means learning to trust that everything that belongs to you will stay and cannot be taken from you. Mastering that opens the door to paradise on Earth. Just know that you carry the key within you. Shannon Hugman, an astrologer and healer, writing for the Spirit Science website on September 9th, reminds us that Jupiter also enters Libra on the 9th. Star writes that Jupiter is the largest planet in the zodiac, and its energy brings expansion, abundance, and good fortune. It's important to understand that we all experience Libra energy, albeit in our own unique ways. This transit is good news for everyone. Libra rules partnership, which means it's going to be a lucky time for love. However, when we are flowing with this energy, it's crucial to understand that the most important relationship you'll ever be in is the relationship you have with yourself. Remember that we are learning to unconditionally love and accept ourselves. It takes time, it takes practice. Nonetheless, all that is needed is your loving intention and willingness to do your best. Get interested in yourself. What do you love? What do you love about yourself? Focus on these questions, even if it's uncomfortable at first. Ideally, you want to change your mindsets and attitudes towards yourself. Jupiter comes into Libra every 12 years. Think back to 12 years ago and look at what you were learning. How were you treating yourself? What did you think of yourself? What was the state of your relationship? It's time to update all of the above. It's time to believe in yourself, to put yourself first without feeling guilty. For those wanting a reminder of Carl Boudreau's message regarding Jupiter's coming back online in Libra on September 9th, the link will be posted in the show summary for the final word. Some may experience nothing, while others may experience everything, and this will depend upon whether or not it's one's time in this moment of now to receive and take in these energies for one's awakening, growth, and service. Magenta Pixie on her YouTube channel posted a message about the 999 Stargate on September the 9th and how this energy merges and influences the energies and changes leading up to the end of the year. It is not a message for everyone, but I believe that most listeners will find something of value here. I leave you this week with this message from Magenta Pixie. Create a wonderful week until our next moment of now.
There are many gateways or stargates within the consciousness of space and time that present themselves to you as you move forward through linear time. These are stargates of energy, created through astrological alignment, moon phases, and numerology through sacred geometry. Currently, upon your planet Earth, in your year of 2016, you approach another stargate in your month of September. The 9th of the 9th stargate is another 999 stargate of completion. You complete another cycle or spiral in your reality. Your 2016 year is a numerologically 9 year. So rather than a geometrically matching pattern of 999, you have a numerologically presented pattern of 999. Those of you who are aware of how geometry, mathematics, patterns and numbers create energy through the awareness of consciousness will be in understanding of this 999 stargate. Shortly after your 999 stargate, you move into the full moon phase, creating a bridge into the equinox on your planet. This is indeed a most auspicious time, should we say. When the fifth dimensional template became available, if you will, for the collective of individuals on Earth moving into an ascension process, the upgrade from confusion into clarity and fear into love was a jump indeed, a quantum leap. Your series of stargates in your year of 2016, in the year of the 9, the year of completion, takes you into a higher awareness of the form and fabric beyond the fifth dimension. The 999 stargate on September the 9th, 2016, is opening that door wider, for the light within the DNA is raised and activated yet more as the awareness begins to be processed regarding the sixth dimensional energies. Many have been aware of the sixth dimensional energies for some time on your planet, and many are in full understanding of the dimensions beyond the sixth, working within quantum multidimensional thinking, processing probability and embracing possibility, moving into an understanding of infinity, indeed of multiple infinities. Yet on a collective level, looking at the ascension itself on Earth as a wave, now is the time you open doors into the sixth dimension. The higher stargates of hyperspace become activated for all. Portals into the other dimensions. The higher stargates of hyperspace are the geometric encoded templates. For when you view the ceiling fabric of the fifth dimension, when you look closely at the skylines, horizons and clouds, you will see the sacred geometrical presentations. The geometric codes are all that you are. The very fabric of the higher stargates of hyperspace, which is the body-mind. The activated body-mind, pineal gland activation. True sight. It is the pineal gland, the inner eye, the third eye with which you truly see that which is real. and that which is true. And within a completion energetic, within a completion year, the sight is given. The pineal sight is activated and processing takes place. Within the exponential growth curve that is Earth's ascension, there is a tipping point, a critical mass. Now is the time for the critical mass point for sixth dimensional awareness. We speak here not of full processing of the sixth dimension at a critical mass point, but the awareness of it. For during your 999 Stargate point, sacred geometry shall touch all fifth dimensional thinkers. We are not saying you leave your fifth dimensional world behind, for you do not. It is simply a merge point, where the ceiling fabric of the fifth dimension becomes the footholds, floors and grounding pads to the sixth dimension. A higher metaphor would be that the higher echelons of the fifth dimension merge with the lower echelons of the sixth dimension and become the same place. Indeed, this metaphor is mathematically correct, for it makes way for a new dimension. Each dimension entering a shift point, an upgrade. And you, who immerse your body-mind within the dimensional fields as you create templates and coordinates for the creation of the vehicle of light, the light body, you undergo the shift point and the upgrade into the crystalline matrix form. So the 999 Stargate on 9th of September 2016, moving through to the full moon phase on the 16th of September, opening the equinox gateway, is an auspicious time indeed. For this is the opening of the Stargates into the sixth dimension. And when the critical mass point is reached regarding the understanding of the fabric of the sixth dimension, you as a planet will exist within a fourth density field. This is the point of the timeline split. For the element of time is no longer linear in the way it has been expressed to you thus far. You will feel no change, yet know you are jumping timelines at this point at an exponential rate. Now is the time for you to choose your timeline. The fourth density positive field is open and has been open since your 21st of December 2012 point. Now the 999 triple Stargate of completion presents you with the opportunity of sight and awareness. Many of you now embody the triple helix formation within, and you shall go further. For as you reach completion, know that this is the completion of another cycle, and there are many cycles. Your completion year, culminating in the August Lion's Gate, raising again during the 999 Stargate into your equinox, and finally into your solstice point. You complete the cycle of sight and awareness regarding the sixth dimension. Your year of 2017 returns to a oneness, beginning a new cycle, and it is this time you will choose your fourth density timeline split. Yet at the end of the completion year, into your unity year, beginning the new cycle, there will be a moment of 0 point, your solstice 0 point. Which 0 point you experience is shaped by your 999 Stargate geometry now. So know this. This Stargate is a preparation for the next cycle of time. No one misses the boat, for there will always be another boat on the never-ending sea of time. For those moving within the collective field of ascension, we say to you, go with the flow and trust the new visionary state you find yourself in. For the teachers of the ascension, the coaches, guides, architects, way showers, catalysts and map makers. We say to you, you have remained within the third dimension to teach the fourth dimension. You have remained within the fourth dimension to teach the fifth dimension. Now you remain within the fifth dimension to teach the sixth dimension. Yet your vantage point is sixth, fifth, fourth, and third dimensional. For as you lead, so do others follow. And those who follow lead others. The domino effect within the dimensional field is embraced within humanity, and as the dimensions merge, so too do humanity merge. Human and spirit merge. Extraterrestrial DNA is switched on. All these codes are brought to you, given to you, activated within you when you think sixth-dimensionally and translate the language of light. This is your moment, your stargate, your completion.
So that is a sample of the unfolding higher consciousness news around the world this week. Cosmic Vision News is broadcast weekly from the CosmicVisionNews.com website. Links to stories used in this broadcast are published in the show summary, available on the website and in the blog. CVN can be followed through its Facebook page, YouTube channel, as well as on Twitter, Google+, and LinkedIn. Thank you for sharing your time with me. I'm Jeffrey West, reminding you that your actions show what your heart is made of. Until our next moment of now, stay grounded in love, hold the vision of light and peace in your heart, and keep your eyes to the skies. Disclosure is unfolding all around you. Namaste.